I'm Jim Cook with Plan the Cool Way, and today we're going to talk about the next recession. Is a recession coming? Absolutely it is. There's always a recession coming. Recessions and economic growth, they're part of a larger cycle. You could say that they're part of the economic seasons that we go through. There aren't just grow and shrink cycles. Instead, there are these transition ones. It's not unlike, let's say, summer, when everything is all bright and happy and the days are long, and then winter, exactly opposite that, when things are cold and miserable, it's not really fun. But then there's these spring and fall zones. And depending on the year, spring and fall may be short, they may be long, they may be rainy and stormy, they may be calm and beautiful. You don't know. Well, that's exactly the same way that the economic cycle works, except that the economic cycle is not tipped to the tilt in the Earth's axis, which governs with relative predictability the weather seasons. But sure as anything, when you have fall, guess what comes next? Winter. But even though you may be in winter, what is always going to come next is spring. This works the same way economically, and I want to challenge you to think about this. We have a lot of news right now about the recession is here and stagflation or things are bad and it could go on forever. It's a media frenzy. It's like blood in the water and the sharks are circling, and those sharks are just the media trying to churn stuff up. That's it. But if I look at the facts of things, I know that if we are in fact in winter right now, and sometimes with the economy, you don't always know if you're in the winter unless it's like a bad winter. So if we are in a winter right now, I know what gets to come next. That you shake out speculation and you end up getting to a point where there's valuable entry points for the market and the plan abides. And we do the same cycle again, right? Up and down, and generally more up than down across a long enough period of time. Now, let's talk about this most currently coming up recession, the one that we don't even know if we're in it, but let's talk about some of the facts around it. I like to use strip malls as a great sampling of how things look for a local economy. It can be different between town to town, but if you go look at strip malls and you see new stores opening or generally they're full, they're rented out, that's normally a sign of a healthier economy. Because it means that these little businesses, many of which start with poor capitalization, people that may be starting a business for the first time and don't have the experience of it, and not really a good track record of saying, hey, we've done this before. They're like the canaries in the coal mine, so to speak, when bad things start to happen. So if I start seeing those strip malls and they're pretty darn full, I normally look at that as a healthier sign for the economy at a base level. Call it the leading indicator. But if you start seeing those strip malls become 50% empty, or more, well, that's a different story. And back in 2008, you might remember seeing stuff like that when you see the We Buy Gold, places popping up, as well as strip malls are generally empty and a lot of companies are laying off employees. There's been some news of layoffs recently, but they've been in very small sectors or maybe singular companies. This is not systemic right now. And that would mean that if we were inside of a recession, man, it would be pretty mild. Kind of like a mild winter. What could make it worse? Well, last time when we had the Great Recession, there was a lot of issues around housing and prices falling, and people couldn't sell their houses, and there's foreclosures. And this would create this tumbling bad effect that had to get washed out of the system after house prices shot up. Recently, we've had house prices shoot up and faster than they should. Does that mean we're headed into another 2008? Not in my opinion. One, because whatever crisis we had before, the fixes to that pave the road for us to grow into the next set of problems, whatever those are. So here's something I want to put out from a fact standpoint to sort of say, maybe we're not in unsure footing, even if we are going to be heading into a recession sometime sooner or later. Here's why. Let's imagine you do not need to move. Right now, unless you had bought a house, basically today, if I say I'm going to buy a house today, now that mortgage rates have shot back up, you probably have a pretty low mortgage rate. And that mortgage being normally one of the largest debt servicing pieces inside of a household can be complemented by car loans. Even if you had purchased a car, save for recently when car prices had gone up across the last year or two, you still probably had a lower interest rate. So those payments for the amount of debt borrowed are technically low, so low that they are considered to be at historic lows, affecting the average household to the tune of, let's say 9.5% of whatever their disposable income is. So if that number right there seems like, wow, my goodness, about 10% going to debt service or less, well, historically, that's been around 10.5 to 11.5 per JP Morgan stats on this. They track it back to 1980. Back in 2007, leading into the Great Recession, it was at 13.5%. So if we do end up in a situation where the Fed keeps cranking tight, the mortgage rates shoot up, everybody goes like, I'm not buying, and the housing market freezes, and you end up having these prices drop, which wouldn't be actually realistic right now, considering how fast they shot up to sort of normalize. If that happened, does that affect you? Well, if you're in your house and you are able to pay your now smaller mortgage than what it was multiple years ago, it's easier for you to get by. And by you, I mean the collective of people out there. If it's easier to make the payments, you don't need to have as much money coming in. And therefore, we're not running right to the hilt where, oh my goodness, I lost a week's pay and everything collapsed. Are there going to be people like that? Sure, there's people that decide not to save. Crazy, but it happens. So are there people that live beyond their means? Absolutely. They will suffer. They always will at times like that. However, I'm talking about the vast majority. If you don't have to move, you just keep on keeping on. And if people are going to keep on keeping on making these payments and just saying, hey, I might have to tighten the belt a little bit, and the things aren't as comfortable, but they weren't devastating. So is it possible that the next recession, the next winter, economic winter we go into, when it happens, is it possible that it's just like, well, it wasn't that bad, even if it was long? Maybe. We have no idea. Nobody has any clue when it's going to happen. There's a lot of guesses and speculation, but no one actually knows. So what if we end up in stagflation, Jim? Yes, kind of like echoes to the 70s where we have higher inflation but lower growth. And guess what? These two, they pass. Think of that as one of those in-betweens, like a fall or a spring where things aren't necessarily the greatest, but they prepare everything for coming out of it. We have a lot of money in play. We have a lot of money in accounts. If those money in accounts, the liquid cash was really low right now, I'd be more worried. If companies could find everybody they needed and unemployment starts shooting up, and by shooting up, by the way, 5%-ish is about a historical average. I'm talking about cranking up to 10 plus. Yeah, those would be concerning things. But those guys right there are kind of ballasts holding us back, supporting what's happening. This makes me feel, in my opinion, that if we are heading into a winter right now, it's not necessarily going to be that terrible. Could there be a series of other things that collide? Yes, but I don't know that the facts necessarily show that right now. We'll see. But what it also means is that as you approach looking at the time ahead, I think that the stock market is sort of pre-suffering for an event that may happen. If it pre-suffers enough, the suffering during the event may actually be kind of small. I want you to ponder that, as we know that everything rides in waves. There are seasons for everything. And if you have questions about how your own account is doing, or maybe how you feel about the economy, reach out to me. I'm happy to share the information that I gather from a variety of different professional sources that I have access to. Jim Cook with Plan the Cool Way. Until next time, take care and keep in mind how the seasons work.